Yo, what is up guys? It's Pedro here, and in today's video I will be going over the Washington Commanders' biggest needs after the 2022 NFL draft. So if you guys are new, make sure to subscribe for Washington and NFL content. I'm on the road to 8,000 subscribers, so please help me get there. Also hit that like button and turn on those notifications so you never miss a video, and go ahead and follow the Twitter. Link is in the description. Now let's get right into the video. Okay, so now that the draft is over, we kind of know what the biggest needs are for the Washington Commanders, and now we know what guys that they could target to fill in those those holes that they do have in the draft. They did address a few needs, like receiver. We needed another receiver, and the Commanders drafted Jahan Dotson, who I think is going to have a pretty solid season for them and is going to help out Terry and Curtis Samuel a lot. So I think they addressed that position need. They also somewhat addressed the D-line depth, especially interior defensive line. They somewhat addressed that with Phidarian Mathis. I still think they need to address that a little bit more. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. And with their third round pick, they got a running back. That was I think running back depth was a position in need. I don't think they needed to do it that high, but I don't have a huge problem with the pick, and I think Brian Robinson will have a huge impact year one. And then you go to the fourth round, Percy Butler, definitely a position need at safety / Buffalo nickel. We'll see what he ends up playing, but I think that definitely was a position in need, and he will help in special teams. And then you go to the fifth round, tight end. We could use another tight end. I don't think it was a huge position need in terms of a draft pick, because I think what we needed more was a guy that could come in and have an instant impact right away. And tight ends usually takes a little while for these guys to develop. I was thinking more of a veteran, but at this point, there aren't any great veteran tight ends available, and the only reason you need to sign a veteran is if you think Logan Thomas is out for a while. But if you think he's going to be healthy for week one, then you don't really need to add a veteran tight end, and this pick is pretty good because Cole Turner is that pass-catching threat you need. And Sam Howell, we got a great value for a pick, and he could turn out to be a backup quarterback. We could really need him next year if Heineke doesn't re-sign with us. He could be our backup quarterback, and I know some people think he could be the quarterback of the future. We'll see about that. And then the two seventh-round picks, cornerback and interior offensive line, both positions in need. And we also addressed address interior offensive line even more, signing guard Trey Turner. So I think we did a pretty good job addressing a lot of our needs, but we still definitely have some needs. So let's go into some of those needs. The first one, and this is the main one, and it's a huge position in need, and that is the linebacker position. Like, by far, linebacker is our biggest position in need. I mean, there's minor holes across the roster, areas that we could get better at, and that's almost every team. But like the glaring hole, the glaring weakness is our linebacking core. I mean, I like Cole Holcomb. I think he's above average. I think he's a solid linebacker in this league, and he can play middle for you, probably best as an outside guy, but he can play middle for you. And then Jamin Davis, outside guy. We'll see. We don't know what we're going to get from Jamin Davis. Like, we're hoping he takes a big step, forward, a big leap in his, second year, but we don't know that. We're banking on that, and I don't know if we should. So that's two right there. Those are really our two NFL linebackers, and then you can say David Mayo as a backup, but besides that, Khaleke Hudson, Drew White, Trey Walker, undrafted free agents, those last two names, it's not looking too great. I think at the minimum, you need to sign at least one veteran linebacker that is, a capable starter. At the very minimum, a below average to average starter. Because right now, at the middle linebacker position, we have really no one. And if you count Cole Holcomb there, that's fine. But then that fills in, there's another hole out there. And, some people, I think in the other video I was talking about, said, we don't use a middle linebacker. That's not true. I mean, last year, we used, linebackers way less because we just didn't have the personnel. We did not have many great linebackers on the team, but we still use middle linebackers. We still use linebackers. Just last year, we used them a lot less than other teams, and partly that's a scheme, but also partly that's just because we didn't have many great linebackers. So I think there's a few guys that they could go after. One guy that's familiar with them, obviously played with the Panthers and Bills, is A.J. Klein, who's not great, but he's an okay starter and much better than someone like David Mayo, who I don't think can start for you. A.J. Klein can be an okay starter for you. And at this point, with the linebacker play that we've had in the last few years, I'll take an okay starter every single day of the week at the middle linebacker position. You can get him for pretty much like the veteran minimum, maybe a little bit more, like 1.5, 2 million, whatever you want. Like, I think that's a reasonable deal for him. And that's one of the low tier options, but some of the other options you could go for: Joe Schobert, who played for the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Jaguars, I believe, in the last few years. He is an option. Alexander Johnson is another option that I would love. I think he is a very, very solid option for them. And then you look at some other options. Quan Alexander from the Saints. I mean, he's good. He's a good coverage guy, but the problem with him is he doesn't stay healthy a lot, so that is an issue for him. But there's some guys that are definitely solid options out there. You could bring back Landon Collins. He's not going to be a middle linebacker for you, but he could kind of play that Buffalo nickel, hybrid between a linebacker and safety. So, there are some options out there, and you don't need to necessarily get a middle linebacker. Like, if you really want to, get one of the best outside linebackers available, and then move Cole Holcomb to the middle, and that is totally fine. But linebacker in general was a it was, besides quarterback, in my opinion, the biggest position need entering this past offseason and the offseason before that. They still haven't addressed it besides the Jamin Davis pick, so I think it needs to be addressed, and they should try to get a guy in sooner rather than later so that they can mesh with the current linebacker group. And maybe if it's A.J. Klein, it's fine if it's later just because he knows the system and everything. But besides that, I think they should get a guy in here pretty soon. Next somewhat position need is cornerback, and I don't think it's a huge position need, but I think you could upgrade there because you got Kendall Fuller and, William Jackson, who I do like. William Jackson didn't have a great first season here, but he was injured, learning a new system, so we'll see what he does in his second year. And Kendall Fuller had a really bad first half of the season, but the second half was very, very good, and he played in the slot the first half of the season, then switched over the outside, and I think that's definitely part of it. And the issue right now, though, is they really don't have a slot cornerback. Like, Kendall Fuller can play in the slot, but again, he played way worse in the slot last year than he did on the outside. And then you got Danny Johnson, who, some fans really like. I think he's okay. I think he's a backup. I think he's a backup, maybe not even a backup, maybe a third stringer. Last year, the only reason he played was because we had a ton of injuries. I think originally he was the last cornerback on the depth chart. Torrey McTyer was over him, and Torrey McTyer was a fourth or fifth corner, and I think it would be nice bringing Torrey McTyer back, but I think we need some more cornerback depth. And I don't know about James Bradberry. I definitely would not mind James Bradberry because he was solid last year for the Giants, but was really good for them in 2020, and familiar with the system, obviously played in Carolina, and it's not going to be cheap, but it won't be as expensive as the level of player he is. You're not going to have to pay $10 million plus, in my opinion, to get someone like James Bradberry. I think you can get him for under $10 million, maybe on a 1-year deal, and I think that would be a pretty solid deal for the Washington Commanders. But then the question is, what do you do with your cornerbacks? Do you put Kendall Fuller back in the slot where he kind of struggled last year, but he was good in the past, and then William Jackson and James Bradberry on the outside? That's a question you're going to have to ask yourself. And see if it's worth it. Maybe they move on from one of those other two corners and bring in Bradberry. I don't know if they would do that, but they kind of did something similar last year where they brought in Charles Leno and released Morgan Moses. So I don't think that'll happen, and I don't think we'll sign James Bradberry, but it definitely is a possibility, and I wouldn't mind it because he is a very, very solid player at this point. I just am wondering where he would fit in. So I think a slot cornerback is more what they need. So, there's still some guys out there. Chris Harris, who, played for the Chargers last couple years, Broncos before, has a connection to Jack Del Rio, who was the defensive coordinator for the Broncos for a couple years. That would be a solid option. Bringing in a veteran slot cornerback, would not mind that at all. You can get him for cheap, and he will come in here and, he's a veteran, so he's going to be able to do what you need him to do. And, he has that connection to Jack Del Rio, so I would not mind that at all. And he will definitely be pretty cheap. So those are kind of some options. I think slot corner is a pretty big position in need. Outside cornerback, not so much, but you definitely still can upgrade. And we'll see what happens after this year. Like if Kendall Fuller and William Jackson struggle, then maybe they'll move on from one of those guys. We'll see. And the next position need, I think defensive line as a whole, and no starters, but I think defensive line depth is a big position need still. Like you look at the front four, you got Montez Sweat, Chase Young, Daron Payne, and Jonathan Allen. Those are all studs right there. But then your depth, not looking so great. Like Efe Obada, I like him, but he shouldn't be your next best guy at the edge rusher position. And then Phidarian Mathis, very solid. Hopefully, I think he's going to have a pretty big impact for us. So, that's a good pick, but you still need more than one guy. Like besides that, Daniel Wise, kind of that edge rusher, like they need more than just, Phidarian Mathis in the middle. Like I think adding someone like Akeem Hicks would be a very solid option. There's some other names right here. You guys can see Quentin Jefferson, Sheldon Richardson. Maybe one of those guys was signed. I think because this tweet was a while ago. Another option though would be Star Lutulelli, and yes, he played for the Bills and for the Panthers. So he would be joining the Commanders, but he would be a solid veteran to have in the room and would be some solid depth for you who has had experience, and that wouldn't be a bad fit in my opinion. Or Akeem Hicks, I would rather have Akeem Hicks. But that's just my personal opinion, but I know some people like some of these other guys better. But that is still a position need. I would add like one veteran defensive lineman or interior defensive lineman, and I would add at least one veteran edge rusher. Melvin Ingram would be my top pick, but there's some other guys out there, Olivier Vernon, and I think there's definitely some guys out there. And you don't need a star. You don't need someone like Jadeveon Clowney, who I believe is still a free agent, but bring in someone that can at least play solid for you, that if Chase Young or Montez Sweat get hurt again, hopefully it doesn't happen, then you can have Melvin Ingram ball out for you. But he also, when those guys are playing, can come in, for 10, 15 snaps a game and ball out, but also can help them in, just be a veteran leader in that locker room, at that position, in that position group, which they didn't have that last year. Both of those guys played really well with Kerrigan, and Kerrigan, I think, helped them a lot. This past year, though, they didn't really have anyone like that in the locker room to look up to show them how to prepare for these games and everything. So adding someone like Melvin Ingram, I think, would be a huge boost to this team. Regardless, it doesn't have to be Melvin Ingram. Just add another edge rusher, because besides Efe Obada, Efe Obada I don't even think was drafted. The other guys are like 7th round picks. Shaka Toney, James Smith Williams, I'm trying to think, William Bradley King, Casey Toohill. So I would still add another one edge rusher and one interior defensive lineman. And I didn't name any offensive positions today just because I think that, obviously, they could use a better quarterback. They could use some better offensive linemen. But at this point, there's no major holes. There are no major holes. And I talked about tight end a little bit, but I think there's more need for a veteran, and not many great veterans out there besides maybe Kyle Rudolph, Jared Cook, Eric Ebron. No one that really moves the needle. So yeah, that's it for today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Also, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. Hopefully everyone enjoys their day today. Thanks for watching, and peace.